I wish.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Do you want a water?
I have a question, and I do understand that you cannot set aside bond money, you can't use that for the 2%. But it sounded from what you were saying that we're going to have fairly significant savings using long-term money for the maintenance items rather than using basically our operating. Is that correct? And if so, the point of my question, if that is in fact the case, or if we do in fact achieve some savings so that we do not have to use regular operating costs, where does that leave the classroom teachers? I know you can't fund classroom teacher salaries out of this bond proposal, but as a ripple effect, as an adjunct to that, surely if we are concerned about the children, there must be some provision made because we are falling behind in terms of the payment to our classroom teachers. And that is really where our needs the road is not.
The savings on the items that we had previously paid for out of operating, that really goes back to 2000, 2001. So what we did when we shifted that focus and went away from more of that pay-as-you-go and trying to cover some of those items out of operating, we shifted those qualifying items out of our operating budget, those capital items, into the bond back in 2001. So that's where the real savings occurred, and that's where you saw the impact on the operating budget. So they're already out. They've been out for 15 years.
So that's already been
It's already done.
There is no bump,
No.
so to speak, in the operating income, operating budget, as you call it, as a result of this, other than the impact of increased debt.
Right, other than what occurred back in 2001.
Right, so all those things have already gone away.
They've already been adjusted out.
So then to simplify this, if you will, there's no real benefit, tangible benefit that I could talk to my classroom teacher friends over here and say better times are coming. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't characterize it that way. I think that what you see on the technology, for example, is to not only replace the items we have that will reach their useful life, but to provide enhanced technology to all of our classrooms in the form of a standard complement available to all of our teachers to give them extra resources that would be a part of that. So I think that is certainly a bump for them.
Certainly, I would agree with that, absolutely.
Another would be the expansion.
Enhanced learning environment.
Right. Another example would be the expansion of the career technology education programs for our students. We have those at each of our high schools now. The types of offerings that are currently at our high schools are a result of surveys from each of our 4 high schools going back to 2005 and 6. And so you see some differences there. What's offered at Lake Collins High School is different than what's offered at Berkeley, Pierce, and Richardson because of that survey feedback from 2005, 2006. What we're doing with, proposing with this enrichment is we've identified 4 priority areas that are a result of feedback from our Career Technology Education Task Force that's been meeting for the last 2 years. And those are business leaders, community members that have met, and they've identified the 4 areas that they feel like we will have the highest projected job growth over the next 10 years. So the intent is to make sure that all 4 high schools have all 4 of those priority areas offered to students. So we see that certainly as a positive for teachers. And Dr. Stone may be able to give you some additional examples.
I definitely want to say something else. And this is going a little off topic, but I think it goes back to the answer to your question where you talked about operating dollars and where we're having our focus. I would invite you to watch our last school board meeting. Our last school board meeting we did, which was a week ago last Monday, we did a big presentation on our budget for 2016-2017. I want you to watch it. I want everybody in the room to watch it because what you would hear in that presentation is a focus on the budget, having the lens of focusing on core instruction and teacher retention. And you're going to hear through the conversation that Mr. Harkrow and I both shared, collaborated on in terms of that budget, is that this year, this budget went, we went into that budget process with not how much do we have to spend and boxing us in that way, but what do we need to support core instruction and supporting our teachers and retaining our awesome teachers that we have. And so I want you to listen to that, because you're going to hear, you're going to hear that we were met with some challenges, but we worked through them so that you're going to see a raise for teachers. You're going to see a focus on increasing applications. You're going to see lots of an emphasis on those two things: core instruction and teacher retention. And I want everyone to watch that board meeting, and you will understand what I'm talking about.
That really is the answer to my question. I mean, my question stated simply is, how do we pay our teachers more? When do we pay them more? And how much more do we pay them because we need to? And so you're telling me that at least the genesis of that, of the answers to those questions, are in that board meeting.
Absolutely, and I want you to watch it. I want everyone to watch it.
And I'll email you with a review.
Okay, I love it.
You mentioned that on Monday night, I guess the trustees are meeting to discuss the options for construction in Lake Highlands. So when will we hear what option is being recommended, whether it's a new K through 6 or it's a 5-6 construction?
Well, I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can tell you sort of the process that we're going to give them all of this information on Monday, as well as we're putting out a survey to all of Lake Highlands and really the community. But this survey will actually ask, where do you live, what is your role, and where do you have kids in school, and it will ask kinds of questions about what do you support, what do you support. So we'll take the results of that survey, we'll take all of the background information and everything that we've collected and take it to the board on Monday, and then we will craft out a plan moving forward.
So when do we get that survey, or how do we get that survey?
We have this survey that's really ready to go. We're talking about it with the board on Monday just to see if there's anything else that we want to add, and it's going to be deployed on Tuesday morning. It's coming out.
Electronically?
It's electronically, and yeah, it's going to be an electronic survey. We'll be doing a blast. Everyone in the community will have access to respond.
Okay, even like maybe our older citizens that may or may not be directly involved?
We have a lot of outreach opportunities that we're working with to ensure that this would go out to the broad audience.
Thank you.
Yes.
Will be decided on by May 7th. Sorry, I have a microphone.
Yeah. No, we'll come back to that question in a second.
Be following up on the outreach that you mentioned to the community for the survey. Is there anything similar, I don't know if this would be the appropriate place, for getting more parents involved? We talked about the teachers, which is great, we need to pay them more and retain our teachers, the best and the brightest. But what about the other side of that, the parent involvement, which everyone that I've heard throughout the years agrees that it's important to the students' education?
I mean, I think that what I would say is this has been, like with the Reflector Committee, just a great opportunity to engage with the community. I think everyone that participated said that we really opened up this authentic dialogue about what we need in our schools. That was a great, we sort of started that with that process, and I know it's been ongoing, but that was just a great process. And I think we're looking to engage with more parents and find all kinds of different outreaches. And, what specifically, though, would you tell me that you would need?
Oh, no, I was just wondering,
Yeah.
that takes money,
Yeah.
like this bond issue takes, money for all the things we need at school, and I was just wondering, had any consideration been put in? It just came from that last, comment that was made. I wonder, is there any money that's been set aside or being considered for reaching out more so that more people can participate in the surveys and more people can participate, alongside, get more people involved in the parents involved with kids' education period.
Okay. You want to talk about how that would, the bond would work with that kind of?
Well, I think, that was part of the intent of the 22 meeting listening tour, was to engage the community and hear from parents and community members and taxpayers, and that was a new process for us. So, that was fairly involved process and timeline that we went through there. This is an example of it. We've made some enhancements to our communication department to try to provide additional outreach to our community and our parents, and so we just see that continuing to go forward.
And I would say that that was one of the best things, to have those 22 meetings. Every time that we would go and engage with the community, we would learn something that the community wanted. We'd go back to the drawing board and we'd make revisions. And then it was changing and evolving all the way, so that we really felt that when we called for the bond on February 15th, that with the recommendation that we made to the board, we could honestly say this is what the community has told us that they want in the bond through that whole process. So that was just, again, that was a great process to engage with the community.
What about the, Leslie, right here, the lady, questions about the decision?
So, yeah, I guess my question was just in regards to the board and mainly the two decisions regarding the elementary schools. I tried to deliver a couple of vote yes signs to people who I thought were vote yeses, who told me, I don't know that I'm voting yes because I don't know that the district has a plan, and I'm not going to vote yes until I know. So that was just, I was kind of surprised by that, but I mean, it doesn't sound like if you're sending out a blast survey, it's going to be done by May.
Yeah, and you know what, I think we'll probably continue to have some dialogue about this, and I was going to give some closing comments to address some of that. You know, I have to tell you, obviously, it's hard to predict where our conversation's going to go on Monday night, so I don't have a crystal ball and know what 6 other board members are going to, how they're going to digest the information we're getting from the committee. And trust me, by living in this community and having I'm over-caffeinated from the amount of coffee I've had with residents over this issue. So I understand the angst that is there regarding wanting to have the decision before May 7th. You know, but what I would tell you is, as a board, we're looking at this decision. I mean, well, first of all, if it were easy, the decision would already been made. So it's a very difficult decision, and I think those that participated on the reflector committee can relay that challenge as well. But we're really looking at this as this is a generational decision for our school district and a generational decision for Lake Highlands. And while I would certainly love to have a decision by May 7th, and we're going to work hard and see if we can't knock that out. If we're not ready or we need additional feedback from the committee, we're going to continue to work through it until we have the right decision. My belief is that, or just my position and thought is, frankly, I'm excited that we were able to get to a point as a board by the time I call the bond to get placeholder funds in there to deal with whatever that ultimate decision is. Those 11 schools that we've added on over the last 5 years, none of those needs presented themselves 5 years ago when we were talking about another bond. So we had to still figure out how we were going to address those, and then also find the funds at that point in time to address those needs. So frankly, I'm thrilled as a board member, but especially as a Lake Highlands resident, that we've been able to flag some dollars in the bond to deal with that, deal with the ultimate decision in a timely manner when it gets done, rather than having to wait on what is already wait even longer to execute something that's already done. So I hope that answers your question. Perspective, obviously, I don't have a crystal ball to see what Monday night's going to look like, and we all realize, trust me, we realize the need to execute something sooner than later. But if it takes us a few more weeks to get to whatever the right solution is, we're going to take a few more weeks to execute what is literally a generational decision for our neighborhood. So.
Good evening, everyone. Before I ask my question, my actual question, important question that I have from the panel, from everyone, I'd like to give you a little background on my question. Back in February, there was an illegal search in the school by an illegal contractor that it was chosen by the Wagner or trustee. And which, it brings me to this point that if you guys choosing the contractors without checking their background, and this person, this contractor has been doing illegal search with the dog since 2012, how do you expect us to trust y'all with $400 million to spend it? This is our money. This is, you see this booth right here? I work hard for my money. Now, how can I trust y'all to spend that money on illegal contractor? I'd like to have an answer. And you're gonna have lawsuit on your hands, civil lawsuits. One of them for sure, I know it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time. But I'd like to know if you guys sitting over there and you choosing the contractors and spending our money, how do you expect us to trust you with that chunk of money?
Respectfully, sir, I'm hoping that you have had conversation with the administration at your school. I am going to ask you, I am going to remind you that the questions that we're here tonight, and that the group has come to talk about, are related to the bond.
Exactly.
And
It's
The money that you guys are collecting, the money.
Yeah.
You guys are having 400 so much money that we are contributing to that, and besides, you're going to increase our tax, school tax, by 8 cents on a dollar. You, Mr. Bono, you are the resident here. Ms. Bono, you are a resident here. How do you expect us to trust you? Is there a trust factor here that you cannot hire somebody, you hiring somebody illegal to do the work, and then also with all these contracts that you're going to give out, how do we know who they are? I like to know every contract that you hire, because I don't want somebody's uncles and aunts and cousins to come and get the contract like some other district did.
Well, let's hang on for a minute. You know, part of the deal is, as far as the trust, you know, what I would say is we've got a track record going back to 2001, actually prior to that, where we brought propositions forward. We said these are the things that we expect to deliver, and we've delivered. And we have not violated the scope or the impact that we shared with the community for any one of those bond elections. If you do, you only get to do it once. You only get to violate once, that trust, and then you're not going to get it again. So go back 15 years, go back 20 years, go back even farther than that. You can look at every single one of our bond elections and what we've told you we were going to do, and we've done exactly what we said we were going to do. Hang on, sir. Hang on, sir.
Politician.
Remember when we talked about it at the beginning? What we're going to do is let me answer the question.
You just did, but you're talking like a politician.
Let me answer the question. So, you know, that's it. I mean, we have delivered for the last 20 years on exactly what we said we were going to do. As far as the procurement process for contracts that we would let, we're required to go through a state-mandated procurement process that's a competitive process. Those vendors are selected as part of that process. That information is shared with the board. It's all decided in the public forum. I don't know whether what you're saying is, I'm not trying to call you a liar, but I do not have the facts about what you're alleging. You need to visit with your building principal. That's all I can say about that, about what happened and what your position is on that. And you need to have a dialogue with that. We'll be happy to have that dialogue with you tonight outside of this venue. So that's the only way I know to answer your question, and that's why you get to vote on May 7th. So we're bringing this proposition forward. We've gone through this process to get feedback and try to incorporate that feedback from our community. And this is what we're bringing forward. That's what the board decided to call the election for. Now you as a voter get to make the decision about whether you want to support it or not. Next question.
Can you tell us where, if you go with the first proposition on building a new elementary school, would be for the bond election, and if you designate the space and the bond passes,
I'm going to ask Mr. Harkerroad to take this question because he'll talk to you about some ideas that we have where we already have some possibilities for a location.
We closed on a piece of property at Walnut Hill and White Rock Trail. Simply because we evaluated 11 different pieces of property over the span of the year, and we had an opportunity to buy that particular piece. That does not obligate the board to that site. It just gives them the flexibility to consider that site. But we're not saying that that is where a school would go. It's just that just gives us that flexibility. We already own land where we have space to be able to add it on campus. Lake Highlands Junior High, for example. If you look at that campus, we have 4.7 acres that we could use to build another campus. And so when the committee was visiting about the notion of a 5th, 6th grade center, for example, where could that be located? What they felt like a good choice would be is on the existing junior high campus. Provides a little better transition. You already have bus routes going from neighborhoods to that site. It's less disruptive for parents, so we don't have to buy additional land. And then the committee actually asked, well, what about, could that be used for a potential K-6 site? And the answer is yes. It's a little smaller than what we would typically look at, but so is the property at Walnut Hill and White Rock Trail. That's a little smaller as well. So that gives us another site. And then Forest Meadow Junior High, we have land available there for a potential site. So we've got 3 potential sites, and then that doesn't rule out the ability to buy another piece of land if the board determines that none of those sites are the most viable option. So we're not obligated, but we do have some choices. Now, I think if you were to ask about the 5th, 6th grade center, if that's the route that they chose to go, I think the location there, we would absolutely be looking at the existing junior high properties for the 5th, 6th grade centers.
I guess my concern is, would you build it on this high school property? Okay, 1 through 6.
That proposal has come forward about the notion of trying to do some type of land swap with the city. And I'm not trying to speak on behalf of the board at all. When that proposal was brought forward by one of our councilmen, there are some concerns. Obviously, one of the big concerns is that would involve moving all of the athletic facilities off of the Lake Highlands High campus and pushing it across the street. And then you'd have quite a large number of students that would be going back and forth across church multiple times a day.
We live right on the other side of the tennis courts, and it gets really crowded, but that's not the concern. We're talking about 3 or 4 schools in the block radius.
Right.
And a library and a water park.
Right.
There'd be nothing left to get around. I would feel bad for the students.
The impact on traffic is another issue, and the congestion that it creates. I think there was some concern about having the younger students with the older students, but there were a number of issues there, and that's not necessarily, I can't speak for the board. It's not something that we are actively pursuing, but they could certainly consider that as a poor location.
And would we know that before the bond was up?
I think that goes back to what Dr. Stone and Mr. Bono said, that they're going to get this information Monday night, and they're going to have an opportunity to ask questions and ask for additional information, get the survey from the larger community. And then, as Mr. Bono mentioned, I think they're committed to trying to make a decision in an expeditious manner, but as long as it's thoughtful and they have an opportunity to evaluate all the data to make the best decision. And if that extends beyond the 7th, then they're prepared to extend beyond the 7th if that's what's necessary. And if they can make the decision sooner, I think they're prepared to, but if it means that they need a little more time and to call the committee back and look at some specifics on those recommendations, that's what would happen. Sure.
I'm personally in favor of the MAC centers, the multi-purpose centers, but I'm just concerned that we might be being a little short-sighted if it's only going to be 60 yards. So building that with the option to maybe rip out the end and extend it later when we find it's not the right size?
Hopefully not. We do it, we like to do it once and we like to do it right. There was a lot of discussion about the size of the field, and the original proposal was an 80-yard field with a 10-yard end zone on either side and then a runoff safety zone around that. And there was quite a bit of concern about that scope and whether that was too much. And so what we did was we looked at a group of benchmark districts that already have these facilities. By the way, there are 62 of these already in place in the Metroplex, with 9 more underway, just so you know. What we used as a driver on the length of the field really was marching band. And so we visited with our executive director for fine arts, Jeff Bradford, and he visited with all of our band directors to determine what is the length of the field that you need to be able to effectively practice and march. And what they said was they need 80 yards. So what we reduced the scope to was a 60-yard field with a 10-yard end zone on either side, and then still having that safety zone around the field, and that gives the marching band students an opportunity to have the full 80 yards and be able to turn without hitting a wall. It also gives our athletes the opportunity to practice and participate and have a safe runoff zone there. So we feel like the length will meet our needs. Now, what we learned when we looked at the benchmark districts is some of the districts have built shorter fields than that 60 plus a 10-yard end zone on either side, and they have had buyer's remorse about it, and they wish they had built a longer field. So, you know, our intent by modifying that scope was try to pull it down, make sure that it still met the needs, but we don't want to have to come back in 5 years, and I don't think you want us to, and say, well, you know, we messed up and it's not big enough. So we feel like we visited with all the folks in athletics and all the folks in fine arts and the users for that facility, and we feel good about the length that's being proposed. Anything shorter than that, and it would compromise the use for marching band. Well, I mean, certainly, but I sure wouldn't want to have to come to you with that and say, you know, gosh, we messed up on the design and we need 10 more yards. I think doing the due diligence. Now, what we haven't done is we haven't designed them completely yet. So when we get to that point, what will happen is there will be reflector groups at each of the 4 high schools that they'll pull together, and they'll bring preliminary designs to them, and they'll have an opportunity to provide input into that design. So certainly that would be fine arts staff, athletic staff, community members, students that would all have an opportunity to give us input. We envision comparable facilities at all 4 high schools. We don't envision, you know, one campus getting something that the other campus doesn't get. The biggest difference is going to be that some of our campuses are more land challenged than others. Like Richardson High has a constraint, and there's only one location for that center there, whereas Lake Highlands, Pierce, and Bergner have a few more options, and we have a little more flexibility there.
This is basically a statement. The board needs to pay attention to their selection process. If they want to select Walnut Hill and Church, that will drive the city of Dallas to improve the right-of-way of Church Road. So many residents, many residents will be opposed to that. So that will drive the widening of Church.
I just wondered about the timeline for construction, the classrooms, and the multi-purpose centers.
We haven't finalized the timeline on those. What we typically do is we look at the construction to accommodate enrollment growth first. And so we're looking at the school between Richardson High and Lake Highlands High. Richardson High hits their capacity number sooner than Lake Highlands does. So they would be a year earlier in the cycle. And Lake Highlands doesn't hit that until that 2020, 2021 range. So we would envision starting that construction for Lake Highlands, it would probably be around the third year. Mr. Longnecker, is that about right? It might start a little earlier than that as far as site work is concerned, but the real construction would start in that third year of the bond and then conclude in the fourth year. And then Richardson High a year ahead of that. Now the multi-purpose activity centers, what we would like to do is we would like to do all four simultaneously. We talked about splitting them, and everybody's in favor of splitting them as long as they get it first, as long as they're one of the high schools that get it first. So I know I wouldn't want to have to decide, who gets it, who does it first. So what we're going to try to do is all four campuses would have those underway and completed simultaneously. And we're looking at, more than likely, it would be the third year of the bond cycle. Sir? Where are you, Leslie?
First, I just want to thank you for your diligence and extensive community involvement coming up with the package. I appreciate that. My question piggybacks off the first gentleman's question, and coming from a family of educators, I'm interested in an educator's perspective. With looking around, and a lot of the districts around us have more robust technology. They're building the more robust and exciting facilities, more dynamic. Are we seeing challenges now in retaining and recruiting top quality teachers, or do we see that even increasing, that challenge increasing if we don't have such technology and such facilities?
I'll take that question and give that answer. We are competing against districts, all of the districts around us, for the best teachers. We have fantastic teachers. We want to retain them. We want to attract, retain, and keep them. We want to retain them. But in terms of the answer to your question, yes. In terms of our competition, we have to ensure that we are having the technology that our teachers need in their classrooms. Because when we get teachers that come to us from other school districts that have what we call a standard classroom complement, they have the most up-to-date technology. They have exactly what they need. They have one-to-one devices so that anytime they can make any kind of assignment to their students and know that their students can have access to the technology. We'll get teachers from other districts that will come in and they'll tell us that Richardson is behind. We don't have the one-to-one. Right now we have currently about a 2-to-1 in terms of devices. And so yes, this is a way that this technology would allow us to remain competitive, to provide what our teachers need in terms of that standard classroom complement, so that they have what they would expect as they're coming from other districts.
Just, and on that, do you see that if the bond doesn't pass, then it's going to be really challenging for us because we won't be able to afford that?
Because our technology budget is funded through bond funds, it will be extremely challenging. Sandra Hayes is our Assistant Superintendent for Technology. I want you to speak to this because this is definitely about your budget.
Yes, if the bond were not to pass, we would have limited funding. We would have some operating funds that we use for maintenance of equipment and for subscription services that we have to pay yearly that you can't use bond fund for, but we would not be able to buy any capital items, no devices for classrooms, no servers, no infrastructure. We would not have any funding for those projects.
Hi. Thanks. I'm saying this, I'm a teacher, so I'm saying this in front of a lot of my bosses. I was in meeting earlier. Okay. Okay, my name is Casey Boland, and I'm a teacher at Lake Highlands, and I've been here for 17 years. So I have incredible buy-in to this community. I have had some of your kids. I've had the whole sets of your kids. Some of you have new kids. They're coming. I love this conversation about all the little things, but I can tell you as a teacher, we really need this to pass. When they say we need complement of technology, my computer does not last for more than 20 minutes. And that's if I pray and yell at it. We need these things to pass. And so we can talk about the multi-use facility, and let me tell you, God, we need those too. And I can give you a whole hour on all the different reasons. I teach economics and AP US history. and our football team needs new turf, and our band needs a place to go, and our dance team needs a place where they don't hit the ceiling when they're trying to practice. I mean, these things are incredibly important for a kid's education. So I am not going to be in a bunch of the other ones. I do not know every single one of the line items, and we are absolutely going to have meetings again about this, and y'all can hash this out without me, but I am begging you, please, if there is any way you can pass this, we really need this to happen. And if that's the wrong answer, I'm sorry.
Now, if this bond is not passed, are there going to be adjustments made so that they can be presented in November? Or is it just, this is all or nothing, and we're not going to be able to raise funds in the near future?
If the bond were not to pass, legally, the next opportunity, you can only take it on what are called uniform election dates, so it's November and May. If you think about the timeline that was in place for this bond, the board, the calendar for them for elections, they had to call the bond in February. So that's 3 months ahead of the election. So if you look at a November election, that would mean they'd have to call it in August. So what that would mean is between May and August, we would have to solicit feedback from the community about what the concerns were. We'd have to go through a similar process with communication, make those adjustments. So realistically, there's not enough time to do that. So if it were to fail, the next time we could realistically bring it forward would be May of 2017.
That being said, I implore you to make a decision on facilities in Lake Highlands before the bond so that we can decide in a manner that is appropriate. I do have a question that I wrote down. Did I hear right that the long-range facilities plan was developed in 2001? That was 15 years ago, and it seems like that it's overdue for revisiting and revising. I suggest that there is a standing long-term facilities plan committee with community support and involvement, including a lot of knowledgeable developers and designers and people in the community who really know what they're talking about. It seems like this long-range facility plan did not include enrollment growth. It says in your things that we had to add 78 classrooms since the last bond. Let's stop doing that. It seems like moving forward that the facility plan should include enrollment growth. Also in your notes, the high school has a 30% growth trajectory. Those kids gotta come from somewhere, and there's nothing in here for the junior highs in terms of classroom enrollment growth planning.
Yeah, I'll let you continue if you have more, but I'm going to forget your
No,
first
I'm
question
done.
if we go
No,
too
I'm
much
done.
farther.
I'm done.
Okay, so on the long-range
Thank you.
facility plan, we initially developed it in 2000, 2001. We have updated it every bond cycle since that time. So it was updated prior to this bond proposition. We have gone through, we go through every one of our facilities, every one of those cycles, and we make adjustments to that based on condition. There's expectations on useful life, and some of those things they can alter. They can be a little longer. Every single bond election since 2001. We use a demographer to give us long-range projections, and then we try to fold that in. I wish I could control the enrollment growth, but I can't, and nor can any of us. And so some of those things happen beyond, despite our best efforts and our best planning, and we need to have the flexibility to react to that. So we did look at long-range enrollment growth back 5 years ago, but it's just happening a little quicker in some areas than what was projected. There's been fluctuations. Sometimes it's down, sometimes it's up. And in Lake Highlands, it's been up for several years. So, at one point, we had the highest number of over 65 taxpayers of any district in the state of Texas. And not that that's a bad thing, it's just a fact. And so what our demographers have been projecting is that we would see turnover or regeneration in those homes. They've been projecting that for years. And so what's happened is, I guess it's sort of like the weather. If you predict that it's going to rain long enough, eventually it will rain. Well, and we finally started seeing that regeneration, and it's happened quicker than what they had projected in some cases. So those are included in our plans. We certainly look at the long-range facility plan on an ongoing basis. And I hope I answered, you have a third part in there on the junior highs. Yeah, that's right. On the junior highs, we already added on enforcement of junior high. That was done last summer, is when it was completed. And Lake Highlands Junior High, we completed work there to give them some additional classrooms, and we've looked at their projected enrollment growth as well for those two schools. Now you have to remember that it's only a 2-year cohort there instead of a 4-year cohort.
Right, but
So,
they have the 30% Lake Highlands high school growth trajectory that you explained earlier.
right.
Those kids have got to have some content.
Well, they do, and so what you have to look at is the capacity for each one of those buildings. So the capacity of Lake Highlands Junior High as a percentage was better than the capacity as a percentage of Lake Highlands High School. So that was included. We've already addressed both those schools, and we're committed to making additional changes at Lake Highlands Junior High if necessary. But the expansion has already occurred. We added 10 classrooms to Forest Meadow Junior High. And we've done renovations at Lake Highlands Junior High to free up space for additional classrooms that are there. Where are you, Lizzie?
If the $437 million bonds are issued over the next 5 years, how would that, what percentage increase or what increase would that represent the district's overall indebtedness?
Our current outstanding debt is about $440 million, approximately. Maybe it changes a little bit from that. So if you just looked at 437 and you say, oh my gosh, you're going to double your total outstanding debt, that's not exactly right. What would happen is we're continuing to aggressively pay down the debt. So that 440 that exists over the next 5 years, over 25% of that will be paid down. We won't sell all of the $437 million at once. It will be phased over the 5-year period. What we try to do is match our what's called a draw schedule of when we anticipate needing to complete the work or buy whatever items are included. We don't want to incur the debt any sooner than we need to match the project or the acquisition. So it would be staggered. So for example, right now we're looking at approximately $84 million sold in year 1, and then maybe around that dollar amount, maybe just slightly higher in year 2. Big year would be year 3 and 4. And so if you look at that, depending on what happens with our taxable values and our interest rate assumptions, we've tried to be very conservative on those in our estimate. When we came up with that 8 cents, that was a maximum. We calculated that last summer to give people an idea of what would be the worst case. What we're looking at is, I think the high water mark on our outstanding debt would be around $600 million. Now, to give you a little perspective on, that is a lot of money. But I think you need some perspective on, how does that relate to anything else?
Well, I have a specific follow-up.
Okay.
Because
Can I give you that little perspective first before
Sure.
we follow up?
Yeah.
Right now, we are at about 24% of our debt capacity number, according to Texas Education Agency. 24%. It's pretty low compared to most other districts. At that $600 million mark, we would be at about 30% of our debt capacity within that 5-year period.
Okay. The question was prompted in a recent Moody's ratings. One of their 3 reasons that there might be a downgrade is there was a significant increase in the indebtedness without a matching increase in the tax base. And I hear what you're saying. I don't know about the debt capacity number, but we're talking about a 50% increase in indebtedness, round numbers. Has the district talked with Moody's, gotten a shadow rating or a private assessment for because having a AAA rating is fantastic. How would this, that projected path, how would they view that?
We talk to Moody's twice a year and Standard & Poor's twice a year. I talk to them personally. So there are a number of criteria they look at, and there's about 60 criteria, as a matter of fact, that they look at in evaluating our creditworthiness. One of the things they're looking at is capacity. So they're looking at that 30% that I talked about. We're at 24% now on our outstanding debt. We'd only be at 30% of our total outstanding debt. If you look at our debt tax rate, we're at 30 cents right now. That is 60% of our maximum debt tax rate. So we have 40% capacity on our tax rate. They look at our assumptions for taxable value, and they've seen over time we've tended to be very conservative on those estimates. And they're looking at the long-range growth within the DFW area in particular, and that's very solid for the next several years at least. And so they also look at our blend of residential versus commercial and how susceptible you are to movements within the market. We are at about 50% residential, 50% commercial, so we have a good blend there. And they look at all those factors. They also look at your capacity financially and how strong are you in that regard. And we are very strong in that regard. We have strong reserves. We do not anticipate that there would be a change in our rating with this issuance of debt. Now, unless you were to change multiple other metrics that they're looking at simultaneously, and then you're at risk for that. So we do not feel like there would be an issue. When we calculated 8 cents, that was the maximum. What we've done since then is we've got some updated information. Dallas Central Appraisal District gave us a preliminary idea of what we're looking at on taxable value growth next year. We've incorporated that into our calculation. We also make modifications on the draw schedule, because what we did when we calculated the maximum effect is we took what was the most we could sell in each of those years and still stay within that 8 cent level. So we've modified that with our tentative draw schedule that we anticipate. So right now, if it were to happen, we're looking at more of like about a 5 cent increase on the debt tax rate, as opposed to that worst case scenario of 8 cents. And Moody's will have that information after we would have a rating call after the bond proposition, and they would have all that information, and they would see what the potential impact was, what our phase-in was. They would also be very concerned about us maintaining our aggressive debt repayment schedule, which we are, and that's built into our projection as well. So we do not feel like we are at risk on that.
Okay, so I understand that right now we're paying about $30 million in principal and $19 million in interest a year. So we're looking at about $50 million that we're spending to repay the current debt, and we're going to be paying about $205 million in debt interest on the 2011, or on the current debt, $411 million in current debt. Why do we not take and set aside that money? Because that money's got to be coming from somewhere. Capital operating fund, capital improvements fund. Why are we not taking that money and setting it aside in a savings account, if you will, in addition to the increase that we have from property values? I know like Highlands property values have skyrocketed, and so there's that increase in the tax base and the tax monies that are coming in. Why not just set that aside for some of the projects?
Because it's illegal. You can only use debt service funds to repay debt. That's it. So you can't use debt service funds to go out and just buy a capital item. You have to use bonds to buy the capital item, and you can only use the debt service to repay the debt. That's the only thing you can legally do with it.
But where's that debt service fund money coming from?
From you, from our taxpayers. I mean,
So
that's,
why does it go into, does it have to go into the debt service fund?
yes. You have, in governmental accounting, you have what's called fund accounting. And in the state of Texas, you have two tax rates for a school district. You have what's called the maintenance and operating fund, and you have something else called the interest and sinking fund, which is the debt service fund. Each of those, your maintenance and operating fund, or your operating budget, those dollars can be used for any legal expenditure. You can buy anything that's legal to buy. You can pay teacher salaries, you can pay utilities, you can buy capital items, you can pay down debt, you can use it for nutrition, you can use it for anything that has a legal purpose. The debt service fund, or that bucket of funds that come from your tax dollars exclusively, can only be used to service the debt. Period. They don't have, the board
What's the
has.
percentage as far as how much of the tax rate goes to the debt service fund and how much goes into the operating? Is
Well,
there
our
a
total
percentage?
tax rate is $1.34, and of which 30 cents is the debt side.
Okay. So then, as far as the increase in the tax rate, or taxes collected because of the higher property values, where does that money go?
It goes to that fund. And so what we're looking at is that, well, both. I mean, you get an increase in your taxable value. Part of that affects your $1.04 on your operating side, and part of it affects your 30 cents on your debt side. So now on the operating side, it works differently, because in the state of Texas, what happens is as your property values go up and our tax revenue goes up on the operating side, our state aid goes down. So there's a sum certain there, and you're held at that sum certain. So as you pay more in property taxes, we receive less in state aid. On the debt service side, 100% of that stays in our district currently. So as your property values go up, the debt tax revenue goes up. And what we've tried to do is, if your property values go up by more than we projected, then we don't need as much of a debt tax rate increase to be able to service that debt. So when we calculated the maximum impact, we tried to use a conservative assumption on your taxable value growth. So for this next year, for example, we had originally projected and built into the calculation on the worst case basis a 1% growth in taxable value. Based on information we got about 2 weeks ago from the Dallas Central Appraisal District, that number is going to be closer to 3.5% to 4%. So we have folded that new assumption into our projections, and we posted that on the website under the frequently asked questions piece, so you can see. And what that does is that causes the impact on the debt tax rate to go down a little bit. So that's what I mentioned when I said originally we were looking at a maximum of 8 cents. Now we're looking at, with those modifications, we're looking at more like about a 5 cent increase. And then if the taxable values grow by more than we projected, we would just adjust that impact on the tax rate accordingly. But we didn't want to be overly aggressive with the number and have anyone think we were being, pie in the sky or Pollyanna about it, and assuming it was all going to be positive, and then there'd be a negative variance, and then we have to come to you and ask you for more than what we said it would. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Maybe a little more answer than you want.
Good evening, my name is John Brewer. Never did Toastmasters, sweating, sorry, listening. Okay, good, all right. Well, I'm a proud alumnus of Spring Valley Elementary. Enrolled there in 1973. Gators. Northwood Junior High and Richardson High School. And my wife and I moved back here when our oldest boy was in the 3rd grade. We got back here as fast as we can, and man, we love it here. This is just, and it's such a great place. And our boys will go to J.J. Pierce, so I'm a little bit of a fish out of water, but I really do care about our entire district. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, board members, administrators, deputy superintendents, for the forum. I mean, this is how it should be done. We all get to come and express our opinion, talk it out. It's healthy, right? I mean, I think we can all agree on that. I just wanted to say, I feel like I might be the only person that's going to emphasize athletics a little bit here, because I grew up in an athletic family. We had to take care of our schoolwork before we got to do anything, though, I'll tell you that. And that's important in our house right now. So that box has to get checked before the athletics come into play.
Thank you.
Well, anyway, but in our house, we believe in excellence in all pursuits. So we came back here because we want our kids to be well educated, well rounded, and have a fighting chance. And I just feel like in athletics, when I was a junior at Richardson High School, one of my coaches is actually in this room, Coach Newby. I just want to talk about how important that time was. We made the playoffs my junior year in football, and it was something I still remember and treasure to this day. There's just a sense of pride about that. And, he taught me to work hard, be on time, be accountable, fight to the end. And those are qualities that I still use in my life today, and I think have helped me be successful and that I can pass along to my kids. We need this to pass. We need it real bad. We needed it 10 years ago for the new facilities and all that. This is long overdue. This is a unique opportunity where we can actually finance it, and I think all the numbers will work. I'm in the real estate business, so I'm very familiar with deferred maintenance. I'm very familiar with the rising costs of construction. And my question really is, if not now, when? I mean, we're watching, the districts to the north leave the dock, and I just feel like we're sitting there. And then, if there's lightning, then my boys don't practice. And God forbid we're playing Plano or Allen or somebody like that. They're practicing. And I'm tired of seeing my kids be dejected on Friday nights because they're getting their tail whipped. God forbid we have any injuries or anything like that. We can't compete because we don't have the depth. We don't have the depth because kids don't want to be part of a program when they're getting kicked in the teeth every weekend. And I know we do have successful sports programs and all that, but I just want to voice my opinion and say we need this real bad. And thank you for the time.
We've lost a couple of people because of the time, so I'm going to ask if Mr. Bono will come on up and close us up. We will stay to take any of your questions that you might have for as long as you want us to stay. We'll talk individually with everyone. Mr. Bono now to close up our remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. And thank you all for being here. My family and I moved to Lake Highlands. I haven't been here as long as many of you. We've been here 8 years now. When we moved back from Houston, and when we made that move, like I'm sure most, if not all of you, the location of our home being fed by quality public schools was a top priority for making our home buying decision. And we looked all over the city. My wife's an ISD alum, so she kept feeling the pull to come back here. But so we settled here just like many of you, and some of you have grandparents that probably made that decision to move to RISD, and you've carried on that family tradition here in Lake Highlands. Some of you who I've met have only been here a year or two, or maybe even months. But regardless of where you are on that spectrum, you've trusted us and trusted RISD to educate your children. And we consider that a significant responsibility, and we appreciate your trust. As Mr. Harper pointed out, you're not alone in making that decision. So in the last 5 years, we are second only to Frisco in the number of, in the increase in the number of students in our area. So we've added more students than McKinney, we've added more students than Allen, we've added more students than Prosper, we've added more students than Salina, and all these other fast-growing districts around us. So, you know, as a board, and I think I can speak for my board members on this, you know, we could very easily look at that through the lenses of, wow, more and more people keep moving here, we must be doing something right, and rest on past successes and just stay the course. But that's not what we've chosen to do. We've chosen to push the envelope, plan for the future, and call a bond that takes us up a notch as a district in our mind. So, you know, and all districts aren't doing it. I mean, there's some districts that we share borders with that are in our same geographic area that have actually seen declines in the same 5-year horizon. So we're thankful for that increase, but we're certainly not resting on past success. And hopefully you see that the bond that we've called is indicative of our belief in the future of this district. I ran for this seat 2 years ago now, so I stood up in front of many of you and I talked about the great opportunity we had as our ISD. You know, we have a lot of students that come from a lot of different backgrounds. Some very wealthy, some come from extreme poverty. 57% of our district is economically disadvantaged, and our students go home at the end of the day and speak almost 100 different languages in their homes when they go back home at the end of the day. Yet we have one great thing working in our favor. We are strategically located in arguably the best economy in America, if not one of the best economies in the world. And so we see that as a great opportunity to utilize our economy, utilize the job base, and provide our kids the education to be successful once they leave our doors and go right out into that great economy that they're folding out in. But that takes investment in our classrooms. It takes investment in our teachers. It takes investment in our kids. So through that lens, we developed the bond that was presented to you tonight. And there's a lot of components in here, but we did it through the lens of what's right for our students. You know, there's $216 million in there to replace items that are reaching end of useful life. So we think that's a pretty basic need and is a big chunk of what we're asking for. You don't have to watch the news much to see what's happening at Lakewood Elementary and South Oak Cliff High School and what happens when you get on that slippery slope of ignoring the needed updates to your facilities. We're certainly nowhere close to there, but we also don't want to end up on that slippery slope so that, you know, one day we wake up and we're well behind like we were back in the 90s. There's $107 million in this bond for construction, so we've allocated a significant portion of money to deal with the construction and capacity needs for all these students that continue to come our way. There's $60 million for multi-purpose facilities. I mean, we look at the data and have the conversation as a board. Students that participate in extracurricular activities have a greater connection to their school environment. They perform better on the whole than students who are not involved in any activities at school. They're connected to coaches, they're connected to additional mentors, and not to mention everything they learn from a hard work and teamwork and leadership standpoint. So we think it's extremely important to continue to invest in those activities, and it's really a continuation of what we've done with past bonds. We've invested significant dollars in fine arts. We upgraded all of our auditoriums with the bond back in 2011, and we see this as the next evolution of investing in those programs. There's $19 million for technology. Casey talked about that. I mean, we don't think, I could very easily call that a basic need, right? But we have it labeled as an enhancement. we don't think it's okay that schools should have different levels of technology, especially at the elementary level, based on how strong their PTA is. I mean, that's not okay. And so we are, getting that standard complement across the board, so that every kid, regardless of where they come to school, has access to the same iPad, and the same laptop, and the same desktop. At the high school level, it's not okay that when an English teacher wants to assign a research paper for her class and needs a complement of laptops for her class, that her wait time is often measured in weeks before she can execute that, as opposed to days or even hours, right? So it's a big need, and it's important, and that will make a huge difference for kids. And we're not talking about, I want to be clear, I mean, we're not talking about planting a kid in front of an iPad 100% of the time. This is about when a teacher and a student need a piece of technology for a lesson and to execute something educational in the classroom, they have access to it without the prolonged wait that exists today, or if they can even access it at all. So we feel like that's significantly important. There's $17 million to upgrade libraries. So I don't know what era this library is, but I could probably guess. Our libraries are significantly underutilized by our students. Many of you probably have college students, and the gathering place that is the college library on a college campus. And we want to bring our libraries into the 21st century and make them a gathering place on this campus, like they are on many college campuses. And it's a significant room, right? I mean, there's a lot of square footage here that that Mr. Miller and his staff can use a lot more efficiently than it's being used today. And then finally, $10 million for career and technical education and ROTC. So Mr. Harper talked about the task force and what they're rolling out. Not all of our kids go to college. And so we feel a responsibility to give them the best chance for a career once they leave our doors. And so we are putting the classes in place. We're upgrading, now instead of just finding a classroom and making it work for a career and technical education class, we are actually designing classes with this bond so that they're getting a meaningful experience in that space. And so with our goal that if you're not going to college, you graduate with a license or certification that gives you a springboard to a career in this great economy that we live in. But it's not just for kids that aren't going to college. I mean, there are, I took an accounting class as a senior in high school and ended up becoming an accounting major because I figured out I had an aptitude for it and I ended up liking it. So it's a great way for kids that are going to college to explore different coursework and make more efficient major and coursework decisions when they get to college. So most of that, for most of you, probably isn't all that controversial. You probably understand that and get that and support that. I know a lot of you here are concerned about the growth piece here in Lake Highlands. I've spoken to many of you. I want to elaborate on my comments a little bit, but I do want to thank the Reflector Committee. I see a lot of people here that have taken a lot of time. They've been away from their families every Tuesday night for the last 6 weeks, and with the idea that they were going to be here there from 6 to 8, but that ended up going a little bit longer, a lot of nights. And they've worked diligently. It's been, I was able to observe four of the 6 meetings, and as a Lake Highlands resident, it was great. I enjoyed seeing parents and teachers and administrators from all 12 of the schools in our area come together and work together collaboratively to try to solve this problem. So I appreciate the diligence that they've worked with in this process. I look forward to getting an update on where they are and where we stand and discussing this with the board on Monday night. But I can tell you, and again, I haven't speaking for them, but I think I know them well enough that I could at least go out on a little bit of a limb. I know that we will approach this with 2 key things in mind. One is genuinely considering that community feedback. There's a lot of good information and a lot of thoughts and items that, you know, even myself as an elementary school parent didn't think about through that process that bubbled to the top in that discussion. So we will genuinely consider that feedback. And then two, we're going to lead this decision with what's best for kids. There have been a lot of discussion out there, and you know, I think people must work for Facebook because there's literally a ton of traffic out there. But regardless of all the chatter and all the other things that are floating around out there, we're going to make this decision through the lenses of what's best for my kids and your kids and their future in Lake Highlands and the future generations. So I would love, again, to tell you that that's going to happen in a matter of weeks so that this was nice and buttoned up, but if we're not going to sacrifice days or weeks in making a generational decision. I don't think you would expect that of us at any other time of the year and in any other decision, and we're certainly not going to do that here. And you know, as I talked about, and Mr. Harper elaborated on a little bit, you know, 2011 was an interesting time. I mean, the economy was still a little bit shaky. You know, we started looking at growth at that point in time, and there wasn't a lot of movement going on. I mean, the real estate activity was pretty slow then. So from a demographer standpoint, there wasn't any trending to suggest that the boom was about to take place. So as a result, there were very little, if any, construction dollars in the 2011 bond, and we had to deal with the growth that came through other means. Fortunately, we know where we are now, and you know, we can talk about junior highs, and I'm sure, you know, those numbers will continue to evolve. That's why we get an update every year, and we will continue to be mindful of where we need to put growth. But you know, I just, in the chair I sit in, I consider that, you know, as a Lake Highlands resident and a neighbor of yours, I feel very fortunate that our challenge presented itself in 2015-16 so that we can thoughtfully allocate dollars in the bond to deal with it, rather than if it happened, you know, if we figured this out a year later, we're still going to come up with the same decision for what's the right thing for kids, but we're going to be scrambling around figuring out how to execute the money, or have to come back to you with another bond, or you know, do something in the next cycle. So I personally choose to look at that through positive lenses, that when we do get to this decision, we have the money to pay for it to push this over the finish line. So at the end of the day, you know, I wanted to just express to you why I thought as a board member this was the right bond for us to call. And I'll give you three things. One, to build on Mr. Harper's comment, it stayed true to our commitment to stay current on our existing capital assets. So Casey's computer that she has to reboot every 20 minutes, my guess is that's on a list to be taken care of pretty quickly, right? So obviously without bond funds, she's continuing to fight with that, or using personal resources or whatever. Number two, it includes much needed enhancements for our students. Technology, multi-purpose facilities, upgrade to our career and technical education programs, etc. And then it includes construction funds, $107 million to help pay for the growth that is coming our way in the next 5 years. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know this is great dialogue. There have been a lot of supportive questions, a lot of questioning of what's going on, and some expression of concerns, but it makes us all better as trustees and as a district to gather together and answer these questions and go forward from there. So I'd ask you to continue your engagement by voting on either early or on May 7th. And I want to thank you for your continued support of our schools, our kids, our community, and our district. It means a lot, and it's not lost on us that one of the reasons we are as successful as we are is because we have amazing parents and amazing community support, and please know how appreciative we are for that. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for your consideration of everything we talked about.
John, it was so nice to have back. I'm getting out of here. What are you doing?
See ya.
Yeah, I'm going to go listen to Alice. Alice has started. I'm getting the hell out of here. It's like 7:61.